I got the divorce email while stationed under the blazing sun of northern Kuwait. 14 years of marriage crumbled into a single PDF sent without warning. Without emotion, my name's Logan Reed. I'm 39 and a master sergeant with the 173rd Airborne. I'd been deployed for 3 months when Kareth, a woman I thought I'd grow old with, decided she was done pretending. The subject line read, "Let's keep this mature." The body? Just 4 sentences. She'd already filed for separation. She'd already drained our savings. She'd already moved some guy named Chase, a motivational coach, into our house in Asheville, North Carolina. I read it twice. Then I took a freezing shower in the sandblasted communal stalls, suited up, and said nothing to anyone. When I returned to my bunk, I replied with one word. Noted. No please. No outrage. Just silence. Because silence is sometimes the sharpest weapon a soldier can draw. Looking back, the signs were never loud. They whispered, barely noticeable at first, but they were there. Kara started skipping our evening video calls. She said the connection was bad, or she was too tired after her new job at the chiropractic clinic. Then came the gym, obsession 5 nights a week, no sweat, no visible results. She stopped asking about my patrols and stopped sending care packages. I brushed it off. I told myself the distance was hard on her. I told myself we were just in a rough patch, but deep down I knew. My name's Logan, and I've served for nearly 2 decades. I've trained to read shifts in terrain, weather, and enemy movement, and I could feel something shifting at home. I didn't confront her. That's not my way, but I took measures, quiet ones. I rented a small storage unit outside of Raleigh. I locked away everything that mattered: my father's service medals, my discharge papers, the deed to our home, thankfully in my name only, courtesy of my VA benefits. I opened a second bank account at a credit union across town, just in case. This wasn't paranoia. This was instinct. You don't ignore a storm because it hasn't made landfall yet. She hugged me at the airport 2 days before deployment. They told me, "Be safe, okay?" Her tone was flat. Her eyes were dry. She was saying goodbye to a dentist, not a husband, heading into a war zone. That's when I realized I was already gone. What do you do when your gut whispers that everything you've built crumbles? You don't shout, you don't swing, you steady your breathing and prepare. That's precisely what I did. My name is Logan Reed, and I've worn this uniform longer than a wedding ring. And when my wife Kara began drifting, not loudly, but in that slow, deliberate way people disappear, I knew I couldn't afford to be blindsided. Not again, not 7,000 miles from home. So I made a plan. First, I gathered every document that mattered: birth certificates, the deed to our home, discharge records, my grandfather's pocket watch, and the silver ring my mom left behind when she passed. I packed them in a weatherproof lockbox and moved them into a storage unit in a quiet corner of Wake County. No drama, no announcement, just quiet insurance. Then came the money. I rerouted 30% of my direct deposits into a new account she didn't know existed. It's just a drip, slow enough to stay unnoticed. Enough that I wouldn't hit the concrete if the floor gave out from under me. This wasn't bitterness. It was math. It was an experience. It was watching good men return to nothing because they trusted too much. When? This was 2 weeks before my final briefing. I was packing my gear, reviewing orders, and checking my will not out of fear, but duty. I'd done this before. But this time, I wasn't just preparing for combat. I was bracing for impact at home. Where? Back in our 2-story colonial in the suburbs, 3 bedrooms, a swing on the porch, and a backyard I'd built with my hands. A house I bought using my VA loan. Technically mine. Spiritually, already hollow. Kara never asked about the storage unit, or the financial shifts, or why I stopped leaving my wedding band on the nightstand. I didn't need to yell. I didn't even need to speak. I just needed to move smart and move first, because even when your heart's breaking, there's still a mission to finish. The night before I deployed, Kara barely looked up from her phone. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table we once sanded and stained in a home that still smelled faintly of cedar and old promises. I asked if she'd packed the socks I liked with the reinforced toes. She nodded, still scrolling. I asked her to take care of our dog, Max. She nodded again. She flinched like I was a stranger when I reached for her hand. Her distance wasn't new, it had just become impossible to ignore. I'm Logan Reed, 39, fatherless and a soldier since I was 21. I've left home more times than I've returned to it whole, but this time was different. This wasn't just another deployment. This was a funeral march for a marriage that had already died. We just hadn't buried it yet. So, why did I still hope? Why did I look for some flicker of the woman I married? Maybe it's because I'm loyal by default. Perhaps because we'd been through a mortgage, 3 moves, and 2 miscarriages. Maybe because part of me still wanted to believe she'd wait. But she was already gone. How did I handle it? The way we're trained to handle chaos quietly, methodically. I loaded my duffel, kissed her cheek like a ghost, and drove silently to base. No tears. No goodbyes worth writing about. She waved from the porch like she was seeing off the mailman. When did I feel it fully? The weight, the fracture, somewhere over the Atlantic, 30,000 feet above what used to be my life. I stared out that window as the lights of the East Coast faded behind us, knowing there was no version of me returning to that house as her husband. Where did I land? Forward operating base, kestrel heat, dust, static radios, but it felt more honest than home, because at least here, I knew who the enemy was. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't pretending. 2 weeks into my deployment, the hammer finally dropped. It started with a ping, a simple alert from the bank app on my government-issued phone just as I was finishing breakfast in the mess hall. The number didn't look real. $82,000 was withdrawn in a single transaction. I blinked and refreshed the screen. My jaw locked. The joint account Kara and I had built over a decade gone. All of it. Savings, emergency fund, deployment bonuses, swept clean. I'm Logan Reed, and at that moment, I wasn't in a war zone. I was in a silent battlefield I never saw coming. Why? Because Kara didn't just walk away from our marriage. She looted it. That withdrawal wasn't a fluke. It was the final blow in a pattern I hadn't wanted to admit. She'd been bleeding small amounts for weeks. There are test runs. Then, when she knew I couldn't stop her, she struck big. I didn't flip the table. I didn't storm out. I finished my eggs silently, then called the bank from the comms tent under a fan spinning in slow, lazy circles. A soft-spoken woman confirmed what I already suspected. Every transfer was authorized from Kara's end. Different devices, different IPs, but all linked back to her. I hung up and stood in the corridor for what felt like an hour, watching other guys FaceTime their kids, wives, and lives still intact. How did I respond? With the same discipline I'd used to clear buildings in Fallujah. I pivoted. Fast. I logged into our home security system, something she'd likely forgotten I could still access, and what I saw made the pit in my stomach drop through the floor. A man I'd never seen chase. I assumed walking Max in my Seahawks hoodie, sipping from my travel mug, waving at the camera like he owned the damn place. And Kara? She was laughing in the kitchen I remodeled with my bare hands, smiling. That's when something inside me snapped, not with rage, but clarity. Cold, surgical clarity. I opened a new documenta list. Call Greg a buddy, turned attorney. Review VA loan terms. Secure emergency leave. Freeze pension movement. When? That night. Less than 12 hours after seeing the footage. Where? In my bunk, under a flickering fluorescent light, 6,000 miles from the life I thought I was protecting. And in that moment, I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a strategista man with a mission. What do you do when the person you trusted most turns your life into a paper trail of betrayal? You build your war-planon document at a time. After watching Chase parade through my house like he'd earned it, wearing my clothes and walking my dog, something inside me locked into place. No panic, no heartbreak, just ice. The kind of cold you only find in people who've been betrayed with surgical precision. I didn't need revenge. I needed justice. I'm Logan Reed, a master sergeant who's cleared buildings under gunfire and patched up brothers in the dirt. But now, my battlefield was a courthouse. Why? Because Kara didn't just steal our money. She forged my name on a loan refinance I never approved. A $250,000 equity pull from the home I paid for with my VA loan. And Chase? Listed as a co-applicant, like this was some starter home for their happily ever after. How? I started with a call to Greg Talbot, my old platoon medic turned lawyer. He picked up on the first ring. I didn't understand the whole story before he said, "Come home," quietly. When? I took emergency leave within 48 hours. No announcement, no warning. I didn't tell Kara I was stateside. Instead, I checked into a cheap motel under a fake name outside Charlotte. My plan wasn't to confront it, was to investigate. Greg met me at a diner 20 miles out and slid a manila folder across the table with his usual no-nonsense tone. "We got a problem," he said, opening it to reveal a scan of a refinance document. My signature stared back at me, except it wasn't mine. The middle initial was wrong. The angle of the L in Logan slanted up instead of down. It was a forgery, and a sloppy one at that. Where? At the county clerk's office, I filed a formal contest on the refinance undergrounds of fraud. I submitted a police report, froze all property activity. By the next morning, I had the bank manager in his office, pale as a ghost, holding the same forged documents and shaking hands. "We'll need to escalate this," he said. "You think?" I replied, sliding my military ID across the desk. That same night, Kara texted me. "Kara, Logan, who have you been talking to at the bank? Chase is freaking out." I didn't answer. "Kara, if this is about the divorce, we can talk like adults." Like adults? Just like the subject line of her email. I turned off my phone. This wasn't about a broken marriage anymore. This was fraud, plain and simple. And I had no intention of walking away until every name, every dollar, and lie accounted for. Because this wasn't her house anymore, it was a crime scene. What began as a betrayal between two people suddenly cracked open into something darker, wider. This wasn't just a wife walking out. It was a web, and I just found the first sticky thread. After filing the fraud reports and freezing activity on the house, I received a quiet call from Greg. "There's more," he said, voice clipped. "You're not going to like it." Why? Because Kara hadn't just forged my signature. She was planning to sell the house. I'm Logan Reed, and I thought I was unraveling a divorce. What I found instead was a coordinated scheme that preyed on soldiers like me, while we were deployed, vulnerable, and thousands of miles from our front doors. How did I find out? It started with a name, Daniel Spencer. On a hunch, Greg subpoenaed the refinance records and banking transfers. Several large deposits, $14,000 in total, had been funneled into an account linked to Spencer, not Chase, someone new. I searched for the name and froze. Daniel Spencer was a local real estate agent in Charlotte specializing in fast cash sales. No questions asked. Deals. Flip and dump tactics. And here he was, receiving funds tied to my house. Greg dug deeper and found that Spencer had closed 3 prior deals with Chase Donnelly, Kara's new live-in motivational speaker. When? The transfers started 2 weeks after I deployed. The timeline was no coincidence. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't fight back. So I returned to the motel, sat on that creaky twin bed with peeling wallpaper, and stared at the ceiling. If this was a one-off mistake, that was one thing. But this had fingerprints. A system, a cycle. Where? Right here in North Carolina, right in my backyard. And now, I wasn't just protecting what was mine, I was staring down a network that had done this before. I met Greg at a park bench the next morning. "This isn't personal anymore," I said. "It's organized theft." He nodded, sliding over a slim folder. Inside, 3 cases of nearly identical stories. Deployed husbands. Unsuspecting wives. Spencer as the agent. Chase as the boyfriend. The pattern was unmistakable. "They're running a con," Greg said, "and you might be the one to blow it open." That night, Kara texted again. "Kara, what's happening, Logan? Chase got pulled over in your truck. The cops are asking questions." I didn't reply, but I smiled, because that truck registered in my name was just impounded, and inside it, stolen prescription pads from the clinic where Kara worked. Evidence. The police were already involved. Now, Greg was speaking with federal contacts, and I was gathering every document, video file, timestamp, and transaction. Because if they wanted a war, they picked the wrong veteran. What started as heartbreak was now a case. What started as a personal betrayal had now become a federal operation. After Chase's arrest and the discovery of the prescription pads in my truck, yes, the one registered in my name, I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. The scheme Kara and Chase had run wasn't a domestic mistake or a messy breakup. It was organized fraud, and it was bigger than I'd imagined. I'm Logan Reed, and I spent years fighting for my country abroad. I never thought the battlefield would shift to my front lawn. But here I was, sitting across from 2 agents from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division in a sterile conference room in downtown Charlotte. Why? Because my case was the missing puzzle piece. The one that showed a deliberate, repeatable system designed to strip deployed service members of their homes, their assets, their entire lives. Who were the players? At the center, Chase Donnelly, a motivational con man with a history of fraud and 2 DUIs. Daniel Spencer is a real estate agent with a pattern of fast cash listings on homes linked to sudden divorces. And Karemi wife who either got in too deep or played along from the start. That's still unclear. How did it work? In the same way, it almost worked on me. Lure, isolate, exploit. They targeted military spouses who were vulnerable, lonely, or already halfway out emotionally. Then they moved fast fake signatures, cash-out refinances, fraudulent sales, all timed perfectly with the husband's deployment. When did I realize the scale? Agent Patel pulled out a whiteboard in that FBI office, listing 11 nearly identical cases across 3 states. The only difference? Most victims didn't catch on until it was too late. Where did that leave me? Right in the center of a federal investigation, holding the one thread that could unravel the whole thing. They recorded my complete statement, collected every file Greg and I had uncovered, email chains, loan documents, surveillance footage, and bank records. Then Agent Donovan leaned forward and said, "We've been building a case on Spencer and Donnelly for months. Yours might be the one that finally brings them down." It wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about protecting others like my soldiers who left home to serve, only to return to ruins. And this time, I wasn't alone. What do you do when you know you're being lied to, watched, manipulated, but the enemy doesn't know you're watching them back? You let them walk right into the trap. The morning after meeting with the FBI, I got a text from Kara. Kara. "Logan, we need to talk in person. Meet me at Freedom Park tomorrow. Please." I didn't reply, but I showed it to Greg over breakfast at a rundown diner on the outskirts of Charlotte. "Don't go," he said, not even looking up from his eggs. "I won't," I said, "but she thinks I will, and that's all I need." Why? Because now I knew their timing. She would think I was tied up at a meeting. She would assume I was distracted. That's when people like Chase make moves. That's when people like Spencer start snapping listing photos. And that morning, I planned to catch them doing precisely that. I'm Logan Reed, and I didn't survive 2 deployments and a broken marriage to flinch now. How did it go down? At 9:30 a.m., Kara left the house, purse slung over her shoulder, dressed like someone ready to stage a scene. She headed downtown right on cue, thinking she was about to ambush me with emotional damage control. She didn't know I was parked across the street, hidden in Greg's rental car with tinted windows, eyes locked on the house. At 9:55 a.m., a white SUV pulled into the driveway. Spencer Realty, printed across the door in block letters. Daniel Spencer stepped out, clipboard in hand, wearing that smug real estate agent swagger-like cologne. Chase met him on the porch. They shook hands like partners, not like friends, like co-conspirators. Greg glanced at me. "You want to go in?" I shook my head. No need. I installed interior cameras last year. They upload everything to the cloud. We watched from the car as I opened the live feed from the kitchen, then the living room. Spencer paced through the house, taking wide-angle photos. Chase followed behind, gesturing like he owned the place. I turned up the volume. "Spencer, I'll list it at 470. Expect an offer around 430. It should close fast. I've got a cash buyer waiting." Chase, "What about the husband?" Spencer, "Doesn't matter. Military guys never make a fuss. He'll take the settlement and disappear." Greg was already recording his screen. I forwarded the footage directly to Agent Patel with one line. "Happening now." "When?" Within 30 minutes, 2 black Suburbans pulled up silently behind the SUV. FBI jackets poured out. I watched, heart pounding, hands steady as Chase was pinned against the hood of his truck and cuffed. Spencer didn't even fight. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Kara pulled up 10 minutes later. Her mouth dropped open as she saw them dragging boxes of documents and electronics out of the house. She stepped onto the lawn, hands over her mouth, whispering things no one could hear. Where was I? Still across the street, watching from the shadows. I called Agent Patel. "We've got everything," she said. "Listing plans, audio proof of conspiracy, intent to defraud. This seals it." "And Kara?" "She's shaken. Whether she was part of the operation or just blind to it. That's still being determined. But she's no longer in control of this story." I ended the call and sat in silence. Years of my life had been siphoned off through lies, stolen passwords, and signature forgeries. But at that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, not revenge. Closure. And this time, the house wasn't just reclaimed. It was mine again. What happens when the storm passes? The sirens fade, and all that's left is silence. You face what remains and decide what to rebuild. After the arrests, after the agents cleared out the house, and after Kara stood helpless on the lawn watching everything unravel, there was only paperwork and truth. The legal process moved quickly. Chase took a plea deal and gave up everything he knew. Spencer did the same. They were tied to scams targeting military families in 3 states' 11 cases. Mine was the 12th. The one that cracked it wide open. A year after the last court date, I got a call from Agent Patel. Chase got 8 years for fraud and identity theft. Spencer, 12, thanks to a string of cooperating witnesses. And Karashi walked away free but empty. That, in itself, was justice. Why did it matter? Because this wasn't just about me. It was about every soldier who deployed thinking their homes were safe, only to come back to betrayal in the very place they thought was sacred. I'm Logan Reed, and I wasn't living in reaction. For the first time in a year. I was finally moving forward. How? Through resolution, not vengeance. Kara agreed to a settlement. Full restitution of the stolen funds, complete forfeiture of any claim to the house, my pension, and an affidavit admitting to the forgery. In return, I didn't press charges. That wasn't mercy. That was closure. She lost everything she schemed for, and I walked away with everything she tried to take. When was the divorce finalized? 6 months to the day after that first email. Let's keep this mature. The irony still stings. Where did I go next? Not back to that house. I sold it within the year too. Many ghosts in the drywall. Too many lies soaked into the floorboards. I used the money to buy a cabin in western Montana. 2 bedrooms, a wood-burning stove, and 10 acres of nothing but pine and silence. I named my dog Scout, a German shepherd with a strong heart and sharp eyes. We split our time between trail runs and building furniture in a garage that smelled like cedar and oil. I took early retirement. 20 years was enough. I'd given enough. Now, I build things I can hold. Fix stuff I can see. The Army gave me discipline. But peace? I had to earn that on my own. Sometimes I think about Kara. Greg says she moved back to Tennessee and is again working as an admin at a dental office and trying to rebuild. I don't feel anger anymore, not even sadness, just distance. She made her choice. I made mine. Then, one afternoon, I opened a letter from a woman in Texas. Her husband was in the Navy and deployed overseas. She'd almost lost everything in the same scam but didn't, because of me. You don't know me, she wrote, but you saved our home. I pinned that letter to my fridge. Because when the past tries to pull you under, you remind yourself that it wasn't all for nothing. People ask me sometimes if I could go back. Would I change anything? And honestly, no. Not because it wasn't painful. Not because I enjoyed the collapse. But because of some truths you don't discover until everything you leaned on falls apart. What happened to me wasn't just about betrayal, it was about blind trust, unspoken assumptions, and what happens when we forget to protect the parts of ourselves we assume are safe. Love doesn't exempt you from being careful, and silence, no matter how noble, can cost more than you realize. What I learned is sharp but straightforward. Always read the fine print. Never ignore your instincts. Prepare not out of fear, but out of respect for yourself. Most of all, I learned that dignity doesn't mean staying silent forever. It means knowing when to speak and how to act, so that you still recognize the man in the mirror when the dust settles. To anyone watching this who's ever been lied to, left behind, or underestimated, don't chase closure. Build something better. Something that can't be forged, faked, or taken. Something that is yours, and only yours. Because when everything else burns down, what's left standing is who you truly are.